In this tutorial, I'd like to share with you how I go about shooting and creating images for use with focus stacking software, and in particular Helicon Focus. Here you can see my library images in Lightroom. The three images here have been shot as a single set to create in focus stack with much greater depth of field than could be achieved through one image. The first image you see with two fingers here in the scene indicates that the next two images have been shot with the intention of focus stacking. The next image that you see is the first image in the focus stack set. This was shot with the focus point on the foreground, probably somewhere around where the mouse pointer is. This second image here was shot where the focus was on the distant hills, and between the two images you should be able to see that we can get a much greater depth of field. The first thing I want to do though is I want to arrange these three images into a single stack within Lightroom. Now the term stack as used by Lightroom is different from focus stacking, but it's just used as a way of organizing the images. So what I'll do is I will click on the first image in the set, I will hold down my shift key, and I will click on the third image in the set so that they're all selected. I then right click with the mouse, select the stacking option and the group into stack, and that's combined all three images into a stack. You can see that the stack has now been collapsed so that only the top image is shown, and we can see the three images in the set. If we click the photo stack indicator, the image stack expands and you can see the other two images. Now once I've done that, I've organized the images as much as I need, and I can actually delete the first image in the stack because I don't need it anymore. So I'll just remove that photo from the stack, and I will actually delete it from the disk as well. So I now have an image stack with two identical images. The only difference between the two images is the point of focus. At this time, I actually choose to go into the develop module and set some make the changes to the image to make it look the way I'd like to. So if I switch over to develop, and I'm just going to make a few adjustments here so that I can increase the contrast in the image. Just make sure I've got a black point, make sure I've got a white point as well, and probably just reduce the exposure a slight amount, a little bit of clarity, possibly a little bit of vibrance. The heather in the foreground is something that I want to emphasize in this image, so I'll just create something that will saturate that a little bit more. I'm going to just add a bit of a dehaze option in as well. I'll close that. The sky as well, I'll just make that a little bit, give that a little bit more pop and a bit more saturation. I'll close that, and I'll go into the highlights and saturation, do some adjustments on particularly the heathers, make them a little bit brighter, and also on the more distant greens there. Okay, so that's the first image in the stack actually adjusted. I can now go back into my library, and what I want to do is I want to apply exactly the same adjustments to this second image. And I'll do that by holding down my control key, clicking on this second image to select it so that I've now got both of the images in the stack selected. I can right click on the image now, and I can go to the develop settings, and I can click the sync settings option. I could also have used the Control Shift and S shortcut key. Okay, when I do that though, the synchronize settings dialog is shown. Make sure that you click the check all option so that every option here is selected. and then synchronize. It's important to do that so that both sets of both of the images in the set have identical processing. I can now export both of these to TIFF files where I can then process them further. I've actually set up something for exporting already, so if I just click the export with previous, it will create two TIFF files and place them in the folder where I actually do most of my processing. So if I switch to that folder now, here we go, you can actually see the two images that I've created. And if I go to Helicon Focus now, you can see that I'm ready here now to process the images. So the first thing I want to do in Helicon Focus is open the two images I've just created. So I use the open images in a focus stacking set, and I will select both of those and open. Now you can see that only one of the images is now displayed, and that's because the two source images are both shown up here as thumbnails, and you can switch between the two just by selecting either one here. As I do that, you should see the image change slightly. There's a little bit of change here in the distant hills, and also if you look down here where the mouse pointer is now in the distance, you can see some moving cars on a road, and I'll show you how to fix those very shortly. Now what we need to do is render these two images into a single image that we can then adjust. Now there's three methods of doing that, and these are shown over here on the right of the screen. Now the first one is a method A, weighted averages. Method B then is the depth map, and also method C is pyramid. Personally I prefer the method B, depth map, but you should try all three with any particular image because it can produce different results. So it's very simple to process this. I've just got some default settings that I like to use with this particular camera. Radius 14, smoothing 3. You can find that if the merging of the images isn't quite to your liking, you can increase the radius and increase the smoothing, and it will create a much better merge between the two. So I'll just click render, and that actually now creates a new image here, which is a composite of the two source images, and what it's done is it's taken the area that's in most focus, or the best focus, from each of the images and combined them into a single one. Now if I were to select the one-to-one view here, we'll take a look at this. So at the moment this has gone to the middle of the screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down my space bar and I'm going to move around the image. Now here we can see in the corner the images are both as sharp as each other, and that's because the image that it's selected here is the one that has been focused in the foreground. So if I go to the more distant objects, you can see that here the image is sharper in this one on the right, and that's because that's the focus stacked image. Over here on the left side of the image, you can see that the hills and also the houses are just not as sharp. If I were to select the other image in our focus stack, you can now see that those two are identical, and moving back to the foreground, you can see that the grass is no longer in focus on the source image. Now if we go to retouching tab up here, so we add the render tab where we combine the image, we then can go to retouching, and one thing we can do here is we can actually show the map. So this shows you where in grey the elements of the image have been taken, or rather ignored where it's in grey, but taken where it's still in colour. And if I select the other source image in the set, you can see here that that was used for the foreground. Okay, so that can be sometimes useful for helping you fix problems. The way we fix problems though is we can blend them out. So what we'll do here is we'll go back to our one-to-one magnification, and again holding the space bar down I can move around the image. And one of the problems here that we see is the moving cars. So what we want to do is remove the car. So on this particular image, you can see that there's no car over here on the left part of the road, but we can see it in the image we've produced. This brush that we've got here that I'm using as the cursor, we can actually, we'll just set a smaller brush, but we can actually paint out the car there by selecting part of this image. And if I now switch to the other source image, what we can do here is, because there's no cars on the road, we can now paint out in our final image there. So we've now created the composited image here. We've taken bits from both source images, and because of that we've been able to actually remove the moving traffic. And that's how you can very quickly fix problems within the images themselves. So we'll go back to our full image now. There we go. We've got front to back sharpness, so now we can actually save this, and it's as simple as going to the saving tab, clicking the save option, and we'll save it as a TIFF image. And we can actually, well, the software itself gives it a new name. We could have used the original name, but the suggested name is one that we'll just use for this example, and it's saved with the various settings that have been set. So you can see there that I used method B to do the rendering. I used a radius of 14 and a smoothing of 3. That can be quite useful in the future to help you look at what settings you used. And I can now save that, and that's the image saved. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial.